Thank you, Craig. So we've kept on good time. So we have about 15 minutes remaining in our webinar at this point to, for discussion and questions. So we have quite a few questions that have come online. So I'll begin with addressing those, but others feel free to keep typing in your questions, and we'll address as many as we can through the noon hour here. So Craig, the first question here we have is, how does the model address the issues that if significant PV is applied on site and some EE savings don't actually go to the grid but to the homeowner in the form of the need to reduce the size of PV? Are all these scenarios now being shown assuming a ZNE home?
Oh boy. Could you repeat that one more time, Smita?
So basically the question is about, how do you capture the savings that are, how does reduce, like, because of the more energy efficiency saving in the optimization and that ending up in reducing the size of PV, how does that get captured? How does that scenario get captured? So you just want to explain that aspect in terms of, that the PV is applied only when all the energy efficiency has been exhausted, basically. I think you just need to clarify that point.
Good. Yeah. So so now I think I understand the question. I hope so, and it does bring up something that's very much worth mentioning in how BEopt works. And so the transition from efficiency to PV is not automatic. What happens in the sequential search is BEopt is always looking from the beginning for the next most cost-effective thing to do. So it's attempting to get energy savings, and in the case, the typical case, and so now I'm going to this kind of homeowner perspective, that efficiency is actually driving down the net of energy-related costs. So it's reducing energy bills, albeit there are investments in efficiency, which we are typically accounting for in an increase in the mortgage payments in new construction. But efficiency initially is actually getting savings and cost reduction. And so the sequential search is choosing which efficiency to do as a result of the energy simulations that are done for the different building designs, each design incorporating a specific measure or option, and finding which is the best thing to do first, and then the process is repeated. And that happens throughout efficiency. At the same time, BEopt is comparing PV. Now, in this region, we typically show this region of efficiency and then a region of PV. But BEopt is considering PV all along the path. And only when it finds that the next efficiency option would in fact be more expensive in terms of unit of saved energy, more expensive per kilowatt hour saved, or if we also have gas, but more expensive per unit of energy saved than PV, then PV is utilized. So the actual, what we call the PV start point, is a function of the building size and characteristics and the climate location, certainly how cold is it, how hot is it, how sunny is it, in terms of what are the benefits for efficiency versus the benefits of PV. And in fact, in the more complicated version, you can even allow efficiency if you specify, for example, a maximum PV size because you have a roof constraint. You might not get to zero energy, and you can allow BEopt to even do some relatively expensive efficiency after you've reached the maximum PV size. And so there's no built-in presumption about that you do certain efficiency things versus doing PV. that's all a result of the optimization, trying to find the most cost-optimal design at any given level of energy savings.
Okay. Another question here is about the cost test. So this basically asks about, does the model align cost tests across energy efficiency, DR, and distributed generation resources? And it's using the same set of input values. Presumably that each of these arenas has a slightly different nuance to the cost test. So how have you handled that?
Let's see. It is using the same approach across the different arenas at this point. Of course, the actual costs for the technology are unique, depending on whether we're talking about efficiency or PV or demand response. But a uniform calculation is done in terms of the cost tests.
So the cost tests, I would say, all use the same cash flows in their calculation, and so it's a matter of BEopt knowing which cash flows to put the various costs or savings into. It's the same cash flows show up in all the calculations for the different utility cost tests.
This is Priya, actually. This is from E3, and I'd worked with Scott and Craig pretty closely on that. And to sort of answer the question, I think Craig and Scott, mostly answered it, which is that the approach that we took here is to use a single set of avoided costs. So it is as if we are sort of applying an integrated approach towards more of an IDSM approach towards how we think about the value of these different approaches. So even though there are the audience person who is asking this question is right that there are subtle nuances, in, for example, a resource balance year of tomorrow, if you're valuing demand response versus EE versus load shifting. Those sort of small nuances are not taken into account into this particular into this approach, because at the end of the day, this is to inform the policymaker or the architect or the engineer to think about what is the value of a particular load impact, not really caring whether that came from one particular PV panel or a pre-cooling strategy or from some specific type of energy efficiency. It's really taking an integrated approach towards how we calculate the cost effectiveness. Although for the most part, a lot of it will be focused on both the energy efficiency measures and the PV for the most part.
Great. Another question here is related to could the utility cost tests and enhancements which are currently implemented for California be modified for utilities outside of the state? And assuming that the utility could provide the inputs and assumptions needed for the analysis.
Okay. So first I want to thank Priya for stepping up and helping to explain the subtleties and the nuances on the utility cost test. I assumed that the question had to do with those, but I really appreciate E3's assistance and familiarity with those kind of details. As far as doing this for other states or other utility areas, technically yes, and the question embedded an important part of the answer, which is the availability of avoided cost data, etc. One thing to mention is that California has a lot going in terms of over the years evolving towards a sort of integrated situation, because there's the need to sync the avoided cost test with weather that's available in a form that we can do building simulations, and also the time-dependent valuation approach. So, but technically, absolutely, that could be done. Of course, this work was focused directly on California, because it was funded by CSI RD&D. But yes, I think it'd be quite interesting to do this elsewhere in the U.S.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, a lot of this was about sort of putting the framework in there so that, on the output graph you can switch between metrics and you can optimize over different metrics and getting all the costs into cash flows that are appropriate for doing the costing. So, I think the incremental of doing this for other locations would be much more straightforward now that we have this framework built.
And this is Priya again, so I just thought I would add something to the discussion, and that is that, as Scott and Craig said, the framework is in place and it would be very easy in principle to expand it. One of the challenges in doing that, and I don't know if the person who's asking the question is from a utility or from some other particular type of organization, but California is one of the few states that have sort of publicly available avoided cost data. Another one is Hawaii. We actually help them develop hourly avoided data. So I know utilities have a lot of this already available for their own sort of internal planning purposes. It's not always made available, but to the extent, that hourly avoided cost data can be made publicly available and shared with NREL, that would facilitate that particular approach. And I mean, and one of the real benefits of what we have here is that for the first time we have this sort of really nice integrated approach between building energy simulation, which historically has sort of resided just within the engineering and the architectural sort of arenas, but now we have a bridge between that and then the avoided costs and the types of analysis that are typically done by the utilities more for program approval purposes. So we have this platform that brings it all together, and it would be great to be able to leverage that more for other places other than California. Thank you.
Great. At this point, we have some of the questions here, but again, I want to table those for the researchers to answer offline because they're more specific to the functionality in BEopt, and so participants just be aware we've recorded your questions, but again, we'll pass them on to the researchers to address offline since they're more specific. One other question I think we can take at this point is, I know you, I think, covered that earlier, but perhaps go back to it, is how can you enter the rates for other utilities, either obtain them from OpenEI or manually? So perhaps you want to just go back and reiterate that section, Craig.
Okay. So, so again, if you want detailed rates in the to get them from OpenEI, you would go to this point, and well, first you would want to launch BEopt in standard or Building America mode rather than California metric mode, and then you can come here, and if you click here, you will actually get a this is related to a previous question. You'll actually get the capability, the opportunity to enter a zip code that will send you to, that will then populate the drop-down with the utility rate that was found. Or you can just do this across and go alphabetically through a range of utilities. There is an option because, as I mentioned, there's thousands of utilities. if you are not in California mode, which, and this is something that's maybe worth mentioning about this project and the capabilities that we've done, the capabilities sort of were implied that the California metrics apply for the 3 California IOU entities, for the large utilities in California. But again, if you're elsewhere in the country, you can choose an existing rate there. If you want to, and OpenEI is kind of a wiki sort of thing. If you don't find your rate there and you have rate information, you could then go to user specified and enter the rate, develop it, whether it's a time of use rate or maybe it's a much simpler rate that's and you can enter that information here using the color scheme here to paint into different schedules for time of day and time of use if there is that level of detail in the rate that you want to enter.
Okay, I think with that we're at the noon hour here Pacific time, so we'll conclude the webinar presentation at this point. Thank you so much to all the presenters for doing a wonderful job and covering. It was a huge range of material this project covered over its time span of 2 years plus, almost 3 years. So that was a lot of material. We probably not covered everything in the full depth. So for that, please go to the website for the detailed report and of course the BEopt NREL website and use the tool. It's available to everybody from courtesy NREL free of charge, and it has these enhanced capabilities added to it through the CSI RD&D funding. And all the questions people ask, again, we have recorded those and we'll be passing them on to be addressed offline. So with that, thank you everybody.